Pokemon Legends Arceus came out 2 years ago and I finally played this game. Yes, I'm a Pokemon fan and I barely got around to playing this. Why? I first thought this was a spin-off game and I had a friend who played it and told me not to play it because it was bad. And so I paid no attention for a couple years until the announcement of Pokemon Legends Z-A. And that's when I was informed that Legends is in fact considered a mainline game. And I've pretty much played all mainline games in some sort of form, and I don't want to let that streak die just yet. And so I played Pokemon Legends Arceus through until beating a certain trainer at the end. I have a whole VOD of me playing it from start to finish, if you're interested. And going off of like the previous Pokemon video I published, Pokemon as a franchise in the past decade has been very stale, with seemingly shipped with less and less content with each new release. In my opinion, the last spectacular Pokemon game was Pokemon Black and White. But for some reason, with Pokemon Legends Arceus, I had a great time, and I'm here scratching my head, where did all the innovation go in the mainline series? But what exactly made Pokemon Legends Arceus good? You isekai your way into an ancient version of Sinnoh, which is called at the time Hisui. You're instantly recruited to an ancient version of Team Galactic, who are ironically good people, to help the professor with a scrapbook, the Pokedex, and help solve the issues of the dimensional rifts. These rifts would cause certain important Pokemon into a frenzy, and because you, as the main character, just have really good dodge rolling capabilities, it's your job to quell these Pokemon lords, all while learning the ancient history of Hisui, as if we didn't go back in time far enough. Legends Arceus kind of serves as a very distant prequel to the world of Diamond and Pearl, and the story itself was decent in a way that there was a lot of nods and references to the mainline games. In fact, it's the combination of the story with the world design and with the characters that really made me feel very nostalgic, and it feels very consistent with the timeline. I don't think there's that many Pokemon games that have a distinct time difference between the games. I know Black, White, and Black 2, White 2 has a 2-year difference. Arceus is like hundreds of years before Diamond and Pearl, and it honestly works very well. Because there was already an emphasis on ancient lore in Diamond and Pearl, but it feels very cool, like uncovering the secrets of Hisui. I freaked out when I saw one of the lakes for the first time. The music, the vibes, yeah, I felt like I just time traveled back to when I was a kid. The story itself is actually pretty decent. There are a lot of characters and all of them are technically new, but some of them are like remixed versions of the faces that we have seen in Diamond and Pearl, like Professor Rowan being the leader of Team Galactic, and Volo looking like Cynthia's brother. There were a couple of funny moments, especially in some of the side quests. I honestly think the tone they set was very appropriate for a game like this. Nothing ever felt out of place. Sometimes someone would be a little goofy, but it doesn't completely drag you out of the experience. And things got serious when it needed to be serious. So when you start journeying the land of Hisui to quell the frenzied Pokemon, which is equivalent to gym leaders, it doesn't feel very repetitive or stale when you get into the cycle. There was also something different every time. Different people with different personalities, unique sub-storylines, new biomes, new Pokemon, more side quests, and new abilities. What I also appreciate was even after you beat the game and see the credit screen roll, there's still a story-driven epilogue that was enticing enough to want to complete. I guess actually encountering Arceus needs the completion of the Pokedex, but I mean, Arceus is considered like the god of all Pokemon, so I'm actually okay with it being like a very high grindy requirement to have. The game loop itself is like a combination of games like Breath of the Wild, Monster Hunter, and obviously Pokemon itself. You have a huge open area to explore with tons of Pokemon to catch. To catch these Pokemon, you either have to send out your Pokemon fight the classic way, or you can just throw your Pokeball to catch them without needing to go into the battle state. You can even craft items to help you catch these Pokemon, such as smoke bombs or lures. I think Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet shows us that catching Pokemon is just an addicting loop to do, even if the game itself is very buggy and very broken. The breakout game this year, Pal World, also showed that even no matter the form of the game, catching creatures is just fun to do. So naturally, catching Pokemon Legends Arceus is just fun. And this time, it feels like we have more control than other mainline Pokemon games, as we can approach the way we catch these Pokemon differently and have an array of tools and items that we can use to make it easier to catch these Pokemon. It even helps that Pokemon in Arceus all have different behaviors. Pokemon like Starlies and Ralts run away from seeing you. There are passive Pokemon that don't really care if you're around them, and there are also aggressive Pokemon that will chase you and attack you. And when they attack you, these wild Pokemon will physically attack the trainer. This is something new in the mainline Pokemon series. The Pokemon will actually throw hands at the player. Unfortunately, Pokemon trainers don't have moves like Fire Punch, but they can roll out of danger, just like what you see in Souls-like games. you have to dodge roll your way out of Pokemon's attacks. At least in my experience, I found myself mostly dodge rolling against like alpha Pokemons, which are basically like mini boss versions of wild Pokemon, and against the Lords, which are like a gym leader equivalent. The inclusion of this makes the game feel more like a survival game rather than like a number stats game that you see in a normal turn-based RPG. It's a nice change of pace and it makes everything I do more active and more real time. I also think it's cool that when you engage in a Pokemon battle with a wild Pokemon, if you aggroed any nearby wild Pokemon, they'll also be in the fight. It can be a challenge being in like a 1v3 scenario, but it's a consequence in taking aggro too many Pokemon. Pokemon battles are slightly altered for this entry. Some moves aren't what they usually are. The first thing that comes to my mind is the Pokemon move Spikes. Normally, it's just a trap that's set on the field that punishes people for swapping Pokemon, as Pokemon that enter when spikes are on the field, they immediately take damage. However, in Legends Arceus, it is treated like a damage over time, dealing damage every turn for roughly 3 turns. They also added a feature where you can do like an altered version of a specific move using Agile Style or Strong Style. Agile Style lowers the base power, but you can act sooner in the next turn. Strong Style increases the base power, but you can act later in the next turn. For the most part, I enjoy this mechanic. I was very confused about it when battling a certain Pokemon trainer that had a full party and was also actively using these styles. And there were times when the opponent would move like 3 times after I use an Agile Style. There's probably like a specific math equation used to determine turn order, but other than that big long Pokemon trainer fight, it was actually quite enjoyable to use. One thing I hated the most was the inventory size. It was really annoying having to constantly buy the bag upgrades to only increase the slot by 1. I think for a game like this, I don't think having a very small bag to begin with is beneficial because you need to hold different types of Pokeballs, medicine, and items just for a normal Pokemon excursion. I just started playing Monster Hunter World, and in that game you also have a limited bag size, but when you go out on an excursion, you usually only have one goal in mind, and you just bring what you need just for that one thing. In Pokemon Arceus, you're not looking for just one Pokemon, you're pretty much catching everything you see, therefore you need to be prepared to find and encounter a good variety of Pokemon. Having to constantly fast travel back just to drop off items into a chest was really tedious, and I hope they give us like a bigger bag space for the future entry. I kind of mentioned this before, but I do wish there were more trainer fights. There aren't that many in the main story, and the few trainer fights that did happen, they only had a couple of Pokemon, making it very easy. The only challenging Pokemon fights in the main story were in the dojo, but it didn't help to level your Pokemon since your Pokemon would gain XP after the battle instead of after beating a single Pokemon. So I ended up just catching even more Pokemon for XP when I needed to level up my Pokemon in the post-game. So obviously, I played this game much after playing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Legends Arceus was released in January 2022, and Scarlet and Violet was released in November of 2022. They were released on the same year, but they seemed very, very different. Obviously, one is more genre blending than the other, but the quality and time put into these games seem on very, very different levels. Legends Arceus had a proper quest log with tons and tons of side quests. There are so many, I'm actually intimidated by the amount of side quests there are. And some of these side quests actually have some interesting story tied to it. Unless you love BBQs in Scarlet and Violet, it virtually has no proper side quest in an open world game. And Scarlet and Violet is more of an open world than Legends Arceus, but Legends Arceus just feels more of an open and interesting world than Scarlet and Violet. And I still kind of consider this Legends a spin-off series, kind of like a Pokemon Mystery Dungeons. But if Nintendo wants to call it a mainline game, then Scarlet and Violet is definitely a step back in both innovation and execution. I really want to know what went wrong in development. If it's 2 different teams making these 2 different games, I kind of want them to swap and have the Legends Arceus team make the next Pokemon game, which is looking to be possibly a remake of Black and White. So much thought and detail is put into the old land of Sinnoh, I kind of want that same treatment with Unova when we revisit there in the remake. Just a quick rundown of comparison. Legends Arceus had a better world. I encountered basically no bugs or visual glitches in Arceus, whereas Scarlet and Violet still have bugs and visual glitches to this day. Arceus has a better quest log, Scarlet and Violet does not. Arceus had better and more meaningful Pokemon spawn points, so encounters felt more intimate. Scarlet and Violet had too many Pokemon spawning at times to where it felt kind of overwhelming. Arceus just overall had more innovation than Scarlet and Violet. I honestly had a better gaming experience with Legends Arceus than I did with Scarlet and Violet. There were many times in Arceus where I was laughing, angry, amazed, and whatnot, but Scarlet and Violet didn't evoke that many emotions out of me. I was mostly going through the motions for most of the time. The only time where it felt like an experience was during the Area Zero part, but that was the only time. It's hard to believe that Arceus came before Scarlet and Violet because Arceus is a much more nuanced and polished open world experience than Scarlet and Violet. I played Legends Arceus mostly because of the announcement of Legends Z-A. That was when I was informed that the Legends series was in fact a mainline series. Slated for a 2025 release, after watching the trailer, I had no opinion because I never played Arceus at the time, so there was nothing for me to go off by. Now that I've played Legends Arceus, I understand why this game was liked by so many people, and I do have some concerns for Z-A. Obviously, Mega Evolutions are returning, so it's safe to say that we will be getting some new Mega Evolution forms to hopefully some important favorite Pokemon. But the big selling point of Arceus was exploring the ancient Sinnoh region in its entirety. It felt very nostalgic to see landmarks in Arceus, but in Z-A, everything will take place in one city. Yes, it's Lumois. It's pretty big, but is it 200 plus Pokemon with multiple different biomes big? There's a lot of variety of Pokemon that belong in different biomes, and I don't think past Lumois City is capable of doing all this. If it becomes into something like Indigo Disc Terrarium Zone, I think will be a disservice to fans in my opinion. It's very early to draw conclusions in things that aren't announced or shown, but I do hope Lumois City is just a hub that you always return to restock and whatnot, and not where the whole Pokemon catching will take place. Pokemon Legends Arceus is a wonderful genre blend of the more primitive and survival take in the Pokemon world that we know and love. The world is designed very well with a lot of lore and Pokemon to catch. The main story features many characters that look familiar and are brimming with full of personality. The world is even more fleshed out with the many side quests that you can choose to do on your own time. Yes, there's not that much actual turn-based Pokemon combat, but the focus and execution of taking matters into your own hands and putting yourself into danger was very exciting. Being the first entry in the series, it's a wonderful first step, and one can only hope that they keep putting this much effort and detail in the next entry of the series. Because what they did here with Legends Arceus is a breath of fresh air in a franchise that is constantly being bogged down by stagnation and dullness. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe to this video if you like this type of content, and if you have any suggestions for any game that you want me to play, you can leave a comment down below or come join the Discord in the link below that I'm active in. See you guys later.